Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Job Train How Talent session. Very special one because we've actually got a real live guest. The relief. It's so nice to have somebody with me rather than just sat here staring at a camera like Billy No Mates and yeah, there we go. Yeah. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you. And welcome to all of you. And yeah, it's nice. I mean, we have met at least before today.
We've done well.
Yeah.
We've now met three times. Yeah. So we first met. We've been working with Michelle for a while now. But we first met at RecFest, didn't we?
That was it. Yeah.
Where you did a session with Morgan Lobb, who's the founder of Visida. We'll talk about Visida in a minute. But I enjoyed your sessions so much that I sort of grabbed you straight afterwards and said, please, will you come on and do a session with me around D&I? So thank you so much for coming with us.
And thank you for inviting me and giving me this opportunity.
Right, everybody, we should be live on LinkedIn. We should be live on Twitter, live on YouTube, and obviously live on Crowdcast too. It's been a really popular session, this one. So really good to see somebody join us for this. If you have any questions at all, this is your session, not mine, not Michelle's. Do pop them in the ask questions bit, which is just down there, and we'll be happy to answer all and any of your questions. Can everybody hear us okay before we start prattling on even more?
Yeah.
If you just put a quick note in the chat just to say that we're coming through loud and clear, and we'll get started. Waiting.
Nobody's hearing us.
Yes. Thanks, Jules. Thank you, Laura. Great. Right. Let's get started. So, Michelle, obviously we know one another quite well, but for everybody else's benefit, will you give us a little bit of an introduction to you and also to Visida for those that may not be familiar with Visida?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm Michelle Brown. I'm heading up marketing at Visida. Only joined them sort of in the middle of this year. And Visida is a diversity and inclusion company. Yes, we are about getting people like a dating site for jobs as a traditional job board. But however, we are about the total diversity and inclusion experience. So we can offer people the consultants that we have. The lead on that is Dan Robertson, and they can come into your company because people think, oh, right, we need to make our company look more colourful. We need to have there's the hidden diversities, the neurodiversities, disabilities, etc. They think, oh, right, we need to make our adverts much more appealing to all of these different people. However, once those people arrive in the company, if you've done nothing to make them welcome once they walk through the door, then you've immediately failed and they may not stay, which is one of the things we say. It's a holistic approach. It's not, let's just get the right people so that we can tick a box.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So with that in mind, let's kick this off. I think that pretty much anybody that's in this session this morning, you're probably aware that D&I is probably like the hottest topic. Look at any report on recruitment, talent, HR, D&I is always right up there. But are we just talking about it? Or are we actually putting any of this into any meaningful action and purpose? Are we just paying lip service to D&I right now, Michelle?
I think, unfortunately, there is quite a strong element of that. And in Visida, we see this because we're asking companies to come and invest in us for us to help them with their diversity. And they're kind of, massive multi-million pound corporations are going in at the basics so that they can tick it off. And then we know of companies that are saying they are using us to say, oh, well, we're with Visida, so we're definitely, covering it off. However, we're very aware that they're not investing enough to actually make it happen. And Smart Recruiter have just done, I'm just looking at my notes over here because...
You can check on notes, that's absolutely fine.
I'm a woman of a certain age.
You can even mention Smart Recruiter just once.
Okay.
Being their competitor and everything, but,
Sorry about that. But they've just actually put out a report, and in there it says that as much as people are talking about it, there's only, I think, 65% of people that are actually dedicating a budget to it. So basically,
any kind of budget.
Yeah, any budget towards their diversity and inclusion strategy. So based on that alone, that basically tells the story, doesn't it? And if they are investing in it, they're not investing enough to make a difference. They're just like, oh, here's a bit of money, and it won't make a difference, but it actually ticks the box. So I think that too many companies are just not investing enough.
And when they are saying that they're investing money, what are they investing that money in?
So us, for instance, well, I say us, they're investing it in. How the procedure works is you as a company come along and you are going to do a diversity and inclusion campaign.
Yeah.
So when you do this campaign, what we do for you is we create a profile page, because many companies can't just instantly go, right, we need to have a diversity and inclusivity section on our website, because, you know, they're big companies and it takes a bit. So what we do is we provide that for them so they can land on it. So that it's investing in that, it's investing in putting the content in, it's creating the job ads, and then we do a marketing campaign, and we use all marketing systems to go out to the world and go, look at this company. They are an engineering company and they want more women, and then they get their brand identified with being a diversity company. However, you have to invest enough to make enough noise. Marketing, that's what it's about. So if they're investing the minimum, they're not making the right amount of noise to get those people on board. And then that's all of that. Then they get the people through the door. But what are they? You need to spend money internally with internal communications, talking to your staff to make sure that they are aware. This is the company policy. This is how we feel about diversity. This is how you need to treat different members of staff when they come on board. If they're a company that's not really used to it, you know, if you're in a company that is mostly about mostly a male-dominated industry, such as engineering, and they're wanting more women on board, then you've got to say, this is no longer acceptable. You know, if you think about a car mechanic workshop where they had those calendars of the naked ladies. Yeah. So if you've got, you're wanting to get female car mechanics in, you have to take down those calendars. It's simple things like that. However, it requires a person to be committed to making sure that the company is fully involved and fully immersed in actually, we are going to become a true diverse and company, and we're going to accept everyone. We're going to make it comfortable for everybody to work with us.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, I guess it's one thing in terms of like, you've got the right policies and stuff in place, but how do you bring everybody with you, and how do you give everybody a level of understanding about what true inclusivity means?
Yeah. So I can say, I know because we're working with them. For instance, Hayes has a complete, intranet section on diversity, which basically states and legislates exactly what the company expects from its staff in terms of this. So that's actually a really important thing. There needs to be somewhere documentation so people know. It shouldn't just be there, though. It needs to be announced and it needs to be reiterated. And if there is ever any incidents that come up, somebody needs to know that the company's got their back and will support them. So it needs to, there's a lot of thinking that needs to go in place to make this work successfully. And I think that's time, and that costs money. You know, we always forget that, you know, you and generally now I'm seeing more and more companies are appointing a diversity specialist within the company, as opposed to just going, oh, HR can deal with that on top of everything else. So it just becomes a bit by the wayside. So I think that if you're a company of a certain size, you should do that, or outsource it so that you've got a diversity expert coming into the company to help you get to a place which is actually truly a diversity.
Yeah, because imagine it's one thing we're having the policies, and I think you said almost like legislating, but that's not necessarily going to bring everybody with you on that journey in terms of making sure that people are aware in terms of their attitudes, their behaviours, what it is like to understand people with their neurodiverse or colour, whatever it might be, and really making them feel part of an organisation rather than just almost like making up the numbers. And I think perhaps there are such strong stats, and you may have some, that almost like back up and show the power of having, you know, a diverse group of people working with your organisation, and the power that can have in terms of its ultimate success.
I haven't got it to hand, but I think it was something along the lines of, if you have, well, basically, only companies that have the most diverse workforce are the most profitable, and it's been proven. I haven't got the stats, but if anybody wants them, I will find them and send them to you. But yeah, it's basically totally proven, because let's face it, and we're seeing it now. If you are let's talk about a supermarket.
Okay.
Right. So a supermarket, everyone has to go to and has to have food. And yet, not now, but in the past, it was like most adverts were about white middle-class people going shopping. So how are you trying to depict to other people to come along to your brand, or that your brand is accepting of us? And I know it seems trivial, but we buy from like buys from like. So if you're not seeing yourself represented in any way, shape, or form in the mass media, then you have nowhere to belong. You have nowhere to go. So it's really important that the more diverse your workforce is, the more that they can represent that. You know, if you are going, oh right, how do we appeal to Asian people? If you've got nobody in your company who is Asian, how do you know? And you know, forget about diversity. I think this happens a lot. People just make assumptions. I'm guilty of it. And I find myself a lot nowadays going, right, we need to appeal to, for instance, young people. And then I go, oh, I think that. And then I go, actually, I haven't got a clue. I am no longer a young person. So you need the people that are who you're trying to reach out to be represented in your workforce. You have to be careful with that, though, because, say, for instance, if I'm in an environment and you're the only black person, you don't want to have that whole onus on you. Everyone goes, oh, what do you think, Michelle? We need to ask you. You need to be careful how you do that. But because
individuals almost being picked out for the fact that they are of colour or neurodiverse or whatever it might be.
Yeah, you have to be careful with that as well. But the other side of it is, you know, you don't have to ask people, because actually, if you're in an environment where I'm here and I'm going, yeah, but what about black people? You've not considered them, or you've not considered that neurodiverse person or that disabled person, and what have you. Those people in the room, if you've got the right environment, will feel that they are able to say that and bring it to your attention, as opposed to being in a situation where it's a negative thing to say, but like, you know, the liberal minded person who's trying to be all good to everyone, who kind of tries to think on behalf of others and often gets it wrong, unfortunately. But yeah, so the more diverse your workforce is, the more profitable a company is. And it's because, as well, you know, my background is PR. That's where I've come from. But I started off in tech PR. And so I knew all about tech. But then when I went into other companies, because you have a different approach in different industries, I could actually apply different learnings from a different industry into it. And it's the same with all forms of diversity. You can apply your background and your different learnings and understandings of the world from your perspective in a company. And so therefore you have something great to impart.
Okay. There's something I want to dig into there, but you mentioned you use the analogy of a supermarket. And obviously having, let's say, whether it's advertisements or imagery or what have you, depicting the fact that it's diverse, that you can appeal to a broad customer base, whether it might be people with a disability or what have you. But my question for you, this is one of the first points on here, is the amount of diversity we're seeing in the media, is that just tokenism?
Yes.
I remember, I'm going to use an example, and it was from quite a few years ago, but we had a customer of ours, and this is probably going back 10 years ago, and thankfully it shows how far we've come on, but they had a paper-based application form. Now, in each individual section of the application form, you had a black family, an Asian family, but one was in a wheelchair, and so on and so forth. And honestly, it grated on you, and to the point of it was actually quite amusing. You could see where they were getting to, but it was just plain tokenism. Is that happening right now?
Yeah, more so.
And how do you combat it? If you challenge and look at your own advertising or the way in which you're presenting yourself potentially to new talent, how can you ensure that you're not going down that route?
Well, Black Lives Matter held everyone up to a magnifying glass. And the fact that CEOs of companies came out and started talking about it was amazing. And it is fantastic. You know, that movement has really made a massive difference. But then it was like every company was like, we've got to be seen to be on board. So we need to have black people in everything we do. And it isn't tokenism if I walk through the doors of, I don't know, John Lewis, Sainsbury's, any of those big supermarkets. And when I walk through the doors And I understand, of course, if you're in a rural part of it, it's not likely to be that. But in a city environment,
it needs
such
to be
as London,
representative. Yeah,
it's got to be representative. If I walk through and it's representative, great. However, I know that's not the case. So, and there's a real risk of turning it the other way. So this was very good and empowering and so on. But if, my mum, brother and I just laugh about it and say, like, did you know there's white people in England? Because when you look at the TV and the adverts, we can't see it anymore. Because it's just like, and I remember once I thought, right, on this ad break, I'm going to count how many ads have a black person in them. And every single ad on a bad ad break. Now, everyone else can think, that's great. And in a way it is, but then it negates it because it's just like everyone's doing it because they have to be seen to be doing it. The tricky question.
And I guess there's a danger that if you're one of those groups, whether you have a disability or you're somebody, you're of colour, then you can actually find that quite insulting.
Yeah. And that's why, we make a joke about it, but we're
finding
almost
here to make up the numbers and here to sell the product.
Yeah, it's a lot of virtue signaling because it's just like, look at us, we are part of this movement, etc. But it needs to be carried through and it needs to be relevant. What I was saying to you about having a diverse workforce. So I'm making this up because I don't really know. And of course, every culture touches on different things, but I don't know, let's say ice skating or something. Say your company has something to do with ice skating and you put black people on it. If that is an exceptional thing for a black person to do, then for me, that's just like, but that's not, you're just doing that because you need to be seen to be doing it. It's not something that they would ordinarily be seen in that environment. Of course, you can't say that there's not going to be, but that's when you look at it and you go, we know that that's not relevant. They're just wanting to make sure that they've got the right colour and they've ticked it off and they've done it. And that's what is the virtue signalling bit. If I, as I said, go into that company and then I see it's represented or they're doing more things, for instance, okay, great, get a black ice skater on, but what are you doing to bring more black ice skaters into that sport? So you've got to carry it through.
And you've got to back it up.
You've got to back it up.
And evidence it in some way.
Absolutely, yeah. And not just do it for the heck of it. Yeah.
So I guess for a lot of people, it's like, it might be seen as perhaps a bit of a minefield in terms of how do we get this right? How do we get the balance correct? Mm-hmm. What is your advice for doing that? Achieving it?
What I said earlier, number one, well, if you haven't got the diverse workforce in the first place, but if you have got people within the workforce that you can turn to, and it doesn't matter what level they're at, do little sessions, make them, in fact, in itself would make people feel so much more
give
included.
Them a degree of ownership in terms of how that is being represented.
Absolutely.
Or how they, as themselves as a group, should feel included within your organisation.
Yeah. There's a lot of
Don't assume that, okay, this is how we should do things.
Yeah. And there's bigger organisations have like LGBTQ groups or African groups or Afro-Caribbean groups so that people can meet together. Personally, and this is really personal, I have always avoided things which stick me in a box because I'm Michelle. I just happen to have this colour skin. So
an amazing purple hair I might have, but you can't see it very well here.
No. Maybe if we get my torch on it later. So I have, but then I can see now more so why that's required. And as long as it's not an isolation, as long as we want you to be able to talk together and then come back to us from it with what you need as a group of people. Great. So that's one thing. And then if you haven't got that diverse workforce, seek external people to help you. Yeah. Because you will never get there yourselves because you think you know, but you don't. And I would say the very, very first thing to do as a company, and they're free and they're all over the place, is to do those unconscious bias tests. Because it turned out I'm more affinity with white people than black, and yet here I sit as a black woman. And it's because of the life I've led.
Where would you find those, and which ones do you recommend?
They're all online, and they're all much of a muchness. Again, I can't remember off the top of my head because, I told you, brain like a sieve. But if you do a search for unconscious bias tests, you will find them. And it's fascinating stuff, and they are free.
I didn't even know those existed.
Yeah. I will have a look whilst we're talking. I'll multitask.
Great. We'll do a write-up after this session.
Yeah.
We'll send out a couple of links as part of the write-up so we can do unconscious bias tests.
But honestly, it's fantastic. We as a company, we all did it. Then we had so this is the kind of thing companies need to do. And this is what I'm talking about, the investment, the budget, take time out for your team, your colleagues, your employers to do this. We did it as a company, and we are a very diverse company, practicing what we preach. And it was so interesting how it came out. I think some of our consultants, because they're so ingrained in it, they came more biased towards the opposite of themselves as well, like myself and things like that. So it's really interesting, and you can do it on race, neurodiversity, disability, all sorts of things, and it tells you how your brain works. And then as a company, you've got a starting point, because you know where you're at, you know whether or not your employees are very open to diversity or not, and then you need to think about, right, how do we address this, how do we fix it?
Leslie, thank you so much. For anybody that perhaps isn't accessing on Crowdcast, Leslie just said there are implicit association tests on the Harvard website. Leslie, thank you so much for that.
That is the one.
I think it's important. I mean, did it surprise you that you had almost a bias or affinity towards white people?
Of course it did.
That can surprise you. Because some of us aren't aware of our own unconscious biases when they may be, and we're all a product of the experiences that we've had through life. It doesn't matter what our views or opinions are or anything at all. They are driven by those, and a lot of those are almost hardwired into us.
That's exactly. So Dan Robertson, I told you, our consultant, he led this whole thing, and I was like, I was kind of devastated, because I thought, and but what you won't know about me, and I'll tell you, is I grew up in Royal Leamington Spa, which is a predominantly white town. I was the only black child in my school, and so for me, white was the normal. It's really funny. One of my white friends has actually highlighted to me, when I say I was different, she said, different to what? That means that you're putting white as the normal. We're all different. There's no starting point, and I needed to get that in my head. I have now. So when I was at school, I would go home from school and I'd get a skirt, stick it on my head, and wave it around so that it looked like long hair, and then I'd do that with my lips so that they look thinner, so I look like everybody else around me. So therefore, when I said to Dan, I came out with I have more affinity to white, and he said, yeah, and that's where that all comes from, because it was my environment. And that was the normal, and I didn't fit in with it. So that's why I wanted to become more like my normal environment.
And, ultimately, we're all tribal. We want to feel like we fit in some ways.
Yeah.
But I guess if you're trying to change yourself to fit in with another group, then there's an inherent problem there.
Absolutely. So that's where it came from. And I, if I lived in Africa, that would have come out that I predominantly have a preference towards black people. So it is a product of your environment. Yeah, definitely.
I think it's important. It's something that we can all do to try and uncover and understand what some of our unconscious biases are. I know that from a job training perspective, as a tech provider and a provider of an ATS, we're constantly looking at different ways in which we can help facilitate more inclusive hiring and recruitment. For example, one of those is the Recite accessibility toolbar, which is amazing, by the way. If you're looking at ways in which you can make your career site more inclusive, then that is a fantastic way of doing things. Whether it's being able to change font sizes to help people that may have dyslexia, or increasing font sizes, or changing contrast, or even actually translating and speaking out loud the content on the page to people for whom English isn't a first language. Brilliant. We try and help support our clients around things like blind CVs or blind applications. But I think Morgan, who is the founder of Facida, made a really interesting point, that there is a danger, although it's good practice to try and assess everybody equally, but there was also a danger that you might just be pushing that problem further down the funnel in terms of the recruitment process.
Yeah. So because at the end of the day, a human being speaks to that person at the end, and if they have a bias, it doesn't matter that they got that far, they're not going to get that job. It was quite interesting. I can't remember who it was. It was with Derek Pilcher from Job Training. We were talking to a gentleman. I can't remember his name, unfortunately. But he actually said that a client came to him who was doing video interviews, because it was back in the pandemic, and said, I want the screen to be blank when they do the interview, and then they recorded the people doing the interviews had to write down where that person was as they went through without seeing them, and then they showed them the person, and then they continued to do the recordings, and everybody would put like 5 if they liked the person or whatever, blank, and then when they saw them, it dropped. But it was really tactical how it dropped, because they were like, oh my gosh, it's obvious. it's because they're disabled or they're black if I change it. So they would change it to sort of a 3 or a 4. So it did mean that person got through the process a bit more, but it clearly showed the bias of people, because when they couldn't see them, they were like, gosh, this person's really good in this interview and everything. And then when they suddenly saw them, they were like, oh, no.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, it was already established there's biases. We all have them. They're inherent. We're not just only going to get rid of them overnight. I think in our experience with some of the clients that we work with, those that are using things like panel shortlisting or panel interviews, where you inherently then have a diverse group of people assessing those candidates that come through the process, helps to remove a lot of that bias.
Yeah.
And I think if you're not doing already, then analysing and looking at the data in terms of analysing, whether it's equal lots of diversity and inclusion sections of the application form, looking at that data and not just analysing, but taking some action against it. You should, within your ATS, if you're using one, be able to very quickly even pinpoint down to who was doing the shortlisting, and then looking at, who was, rejected at each stage of the process. Is there an issue there? Do we need to then sit down with that individual, perhaps even just point out and make them aware that there might be an element of bias that perhaps they're not even aware of, and then sit down and discuss with them? Because I just think at the moment we're still not, within the recruitment industry, doing enough to ensure that our processes are inclusive.
No.
And we're supporting diverse recruitment. So I just don't think it's happening yet.
Yeah. The unfortunately, though, that's all fantastic as well. And that's definitely what the other side of it is, when a person gets a promotion or gets a job and they are a person of colour or disability or whatever, and then it's like, they've only got it because of. So that is another thing that is, unfortunately, it's a byproduct of all of this. It's like when people see a person in a position, they question whether they got that position on merit. And I remember, I'm getting a bit morbid, but anyway, but my granddad, his last words to me were, get that bit of paper, get that degree, because they can't take that away from you, because then that's my ticket in if anyone said anything, and also to my brother, you've got to work twice as hard as everybody else. So then when you achieve stuff and everybody negates it because they think, oh, it's because that company needed to have certain people in there and so on, it's really tough. So, be aware of that, because if you're one of those people that questions the ability of a person based on the fact, they got that job because of the colour of their skin, that, of course, is another unconscious bias.
How do you tackle that one? Because there's two things. Firstly, let's say you were talking about that promotion, and it completely, it takes away all of the achievement and all the hard work behind it for you to achieve that promotion, because you feel that perhaps you've just placed into it just to make up the numbers. And equally, I've had some conversations quite recently about, let's say, a typical middle-aged white male being passed over for promotion opportunities to make way for somebody that is diverse, whether they had a disability or whatever it might be. So there's a real danger there. Yeah,
there is. And I don't know what the answer is. I've got to be honest. It's a tricky one. But I do think, be honest as a company and do put the best people for the job in the position. Now, it's really hard anyway, because if you're promoting somebody from within, there's a bias anyway, because you've worked with them and you understand them and everything. And yes, there is the whole, you want to promote the right people based on your tick list, unfortunately.
Yeah.
However, as a company, maybe, I'm just making this up off the top of my head, maybe you actually share the rationale behind why you pick that person over another person. Maybe you become more transparent in the decision making, so that element of that disappears. Because if you can rationalize, we all get it when you go, I'm sorry, you didn't get the job because blah. Well, then as long as that doesn't meet the same criteria as the other person, then you are not negating that person getting that job. Maybe that's something to think about. But it is so hard and it is a minefield. But I think if you as a company promote somebody of colour into a position that there is a possibility that they're going to come up against those kind of issues, you need to think about how, as a company, you go, we have put this person in this position because of blah, and internal PR, and promote and let everybody know that there was a validity in that decision making.
Absolutely. I mean, that goes to pretty much any decision you should make in business full stop. You use data and hard metrics to justify a certain course of action. And the same, for anybody that's concerned about the same should just be applied to recruitment or how you manage internal talent, whatever it might be. So I think it's something that we should all be aware of, and that certainly takes a lot of the concern out of it in terms of the decision-making process and why people were promoted into certain roles or not. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about D&I or just recruitment in a general sense of it being fair and transparent. It should always be fair and transparent in that way.
Yeah, definitely. It'd be interesting, actually, wouldn't it, to see how many things happen differently during Black History Month. So if you could do like stats about how many people got more promoted or things like that, that would be really interesting to see, because it's bringing it so in people's faces, it's everywhere. It'd be interesting to see if you could actually correlate that month with seeing different things happening. And the same with
hard for
Disability
everybody
Month.
not to get swept up in it. It's mental health awareness week and that kind of thing. The same is absolutely true. Huge stigma around that. And people still scared to put their head above the parapet a little bit. There seems to be a wave for sort of, let's say 1 week of the year or 1 month of the year, and then after that it also kind of dies away a little bit. So there's a question for you in that, in terms of how can you, or how should we consider sustaining that right the way through, rather than just perhaps celebrating, Black History Month or Mental Health Awareness Week or what have you, and you can have this flurry of activity and suddenly it dies away. It's got to be something that lives and breathes within an organisation in terms of recognition, understanding.
And you just said it, basically, if you as a company are truly wanting to be diverse and you're wanting to equal, we keep talking about diversity and inclusion, but what we're talking about is equaling the playing field for all. We're saying, let's make everybody be equal so that they all got the same chance to do everything. That's what we're talking about. And it's Morgan that actually, emphasizes that a lot. It's like we're talking about equity, really, more than anything else. If you are a company that is truly following this and adhering to it, it doesn't matter what month it is. This should be ongoing. So as a company, make your internal reminders, maybe say, in the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about that. It doesn't matter that it's not the national one, we as a company. And I actually know a friend of mine worked at a company that they did that. They used to have different weeks where they'd be like, we're going to do mental health week and so on. Just an aside on what you just said that about mental awareness and everything like this. And I was talking to Morgan about this, and he pointed out, and I know anyway, yes, mental health awareness is people don't want to talk about it. The difference is they can hide that. You can hide your sexuality. You can hide your mental health awareness. You cannot hide the colour of your skin. I can never walk down the street and look like a white person. Well, with a lot of prosthetics and stuff, but but I can never do that. This I can't hide that element of my person. So that's why I think people of colour sometimes get a little bit frustrated with people when they try and sort of equalise it out with all of these other things, because actually our difference, I hate to use, I'm not saying difference, but our thing is something that cannot be changed, cannot be hidden. It's there forever.
Got a really good question here actually from Chris. Chris, thanks for your question. So the question is, what are the required talent and skills are not represented or reflective of the geographic diversity, result equals being forced into recruiting from the existing non-diverse talent pool?
Well, so if you that's what I was saying about it depends on where you are. So if you're in London, you're going to have a massive diverse talent pool to pick from. It's not the issue that there's not the candidates out there. It's the issue generally is that the way recruitment ads are done and where people look isn't where those people are going to be. People of colour, because often they feel that life is going to be harder, go out and try and get more education, more tick boxes of education certificates, whatever, to acknowledge I can do this, because you can't take that away. But I think the issue with the recruitment industry is that the way ads are still written are it's not intentional. It's not intentionally written, but the way they're written is they completely exclude people straight away. So for instance, saying that somebody has to have a degree to, I don't know, become a manager in a supermarket. Why? If I've worked on the shop floor and I've packed fruit and everything, and I've worked my way up, and I talk to customers every day, and I understand it. Why can't I become a manager? Why can't I be promoted? If I've gone and done an NVQ, if you don't actually in your job ad say people with NVQs and as well as degrees, etc. If you because of course you're trying to look at a way of reducing the funnel of people coming in.
Yeah.
But by doing so, often the way that ads are written actually exclude the diverse people that are out there that are capable of doing it. So yes, there's an issue of geography. I live in a little town called HoW.
I know I was going to bring this one up actually. Go on.
So for those of you who don't know it, but for those of you who do know it, there's a TV program called Last of the Summer Wine, which is a lot of old men running around in the countryside getting up to mischief. And I live there. And when I did move there, and I've literally just written an article, and the first line of it is, I was the only black in the village. So it's much more diverse now, but at the time it was like that. So actually, for companies there, they would really struggle to get a diverse workforce. But that's just in one element. Let's not forget, I'm talking to you, of course, because I sit here as a black woman, about me as a black woman being represented, but actually it's not just that, it's every area. So if you can't find somebody that fits certain criteria, there's a lot of different diverse criteria that you can fit. But as we said earlier on, your company needs to be representative of where you are. Also, let's not forget, we've just had a pandemic, and that pandemic has flagged up that you can employ people from anywhere. And in fact, Versida's business model is, we have been working like the pandemic forever, because I'm based in Yorkshire, the head office is in Twickenham, we have somebody based in Tenerife, and so on. So don't just look on your doorstep anymore, because if it's a job that can be done without physically having to be within the office, you can employ people from anywhere. And that diverse workforce is out there. It's just, you need to think about how you get to them.
Yeah, absolutely. We're touching on race and touching on disability as well. It's probably worth mentioning that we will look at inclusive recruitment. I was at the IHR conference in Manchester last week, and the last and final talk was truly inspiring. Two people that set up this organisation called Bridge of Hope. Again, I'll share out a link in it. And they look at all kinds of people that have real challenges in terms of getting into the world of work. So those may be, for example, people that really have struggled in life. Perhaps they've been homeless. Some people that are ex-forces, and people that are ex-forces do really struggle to get back into the world of work because they're so used to being almost institutionalized. It is a way of life, and then coming into this world is sometimes a real challenge for people in terms of understanding where they fit in, what transferable skills they've got, and where those can be applied. And then also looking at ex-offenders too. Alex, thanks for sharing that. It was really, really inspiring. But ex-offenders too, I think it's probably quite widely publicised how Timpson's, the shoe company, have an active policy of bringing ex-offenders into the organisation, and the huge success they've had around that. So when we look at diversity and inclusivity, it's not just necessarily, it doesn't matter where you are, there will be people that are underrepresented in some way, people that have some fantastic, as you said, to your point, transferable skills or shared or common values. I mean, for us, when we're hiring into job training, obviously, if we're recruiting for a software developer, we need somebody that understands that because it is this very specific skill. But a lot of the time we bring people into our organization, we hire based on attitude, based on shared values and things. The rest of it you can train. Absolutely. In many cases.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you job train is there to help people, because if you are a big company, the thousands of applicants you get, you need to be able to narrow them down. And this is where the challenge lies, because it's like, how do you get it to a point where the HR recruiter is not having to sift through thousands to find that person that, actually they're not trained, but we could train them. And this is the disconnect. And maybe it's more, maybe we have to go back to doing more live testing, or I don't know, that's still, again, that actually eliminates certain people out of the equation as well, because if you're not computer literate, I mean, the pandemic as well has highlighted the different socio-economic structures. I mean, we've all seen each other's colleagues' houses and rooms that they're working out of, or what have you as well. And it's just been, and that again, it highlights, if I'm lucky, I've got a dedicated office in my house. I haven't got any children. I haven't got my husband walking across the back of the screen and all that sort of thing. And so it's like, so that wouldn't work, what I was just thinking about. But yeah, I think we've just got to try and think differently of how do we get these other people on board. I do know, for instance, I think these work well, but again, it's the physicality of it. When companies have open days and they get groups of people in and they do sessions where everybody just chats and they ask a few questions in breakout groups, they work really well.
Okay.
Because you as an observer get to see somebody just being themselves after a while, because after a while everyone forgets that that's a prospective boss over there, because they're just talking to like-minded people who are all there, and you set them a challenge and you can see who becomes the natural leader, who becomes who's a complete finisher, all that kind of stuff and everything. And then you would find those people that you wouldn't ordinarily find because you're doing it on a piece of paper or across a video.
Perhaps you quite naturally then start to move beyond those kind of dangerous, hardwired preconceptions or first impressions you might have an individual based on,
Yeah. Oh, I mean, talking of that, and I am digressing a little bit, but I do love this. So I'm going to now do an impersonation of my mum. So my mum would speak to you and say, "Hello, good afternoon, lovely to meet you," exactly like that. So she's very, very posh. And so only recently, so she had an altercation with a lady in a car, and this woman was like, "Ooh, blah, blah, blah." And then my mum went, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I hadn't realised." And this woman's face just drained because she saw my mum and she expected attitude and accent and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, to your point, if you get a load of people in a room, I'm not posh, but I'm quite well spoken and I don't depict what everyone expects me to be, just on first impression sort of thing. I say everyone, I'm being overly generalistic, but I just think those kind of environments where you get to meet people and you see them in a different light, see them themselves, because actually it's very hard to get yourself across. I mean, you and I sitting here, we're quite confident and we're happy to sit in front of a camera and stuff, but not everybody is.
Yeah.
So I think those kind of things, but they are quite costly. But going back to what I said, invest. If you want to get this bigger, diverse group, invest in these kind of things. Do a roadshow. Go around the country doing these things. If as a company, if you're big enough, you're looking for the right people for your job, you want a more diverse workforce, people are prepared to move, go and do a roadshow and have we're looking for people, we're going to be here on this date, and get people and get them in the room and talk to them. And I think that's possibly the way that people need to start thinking.
Yeah, I think, we're going right back to the beginning of this talk, and we'll start to summarise, we'll start to wrap up the session a little bit. But, are we doing enough? Answer, no. I suspect perhaps some of that inaction is just a fear of getting things wrong, for sure.
Yeah.
And what we'll do following the session, we'll do the write-up. We will share some links as well, because I'm certainly aware of some people in my network that can really help with this. I know obviously you are representing Vercida, so from an attraction perspective, you need advice.
Totally.
Then people like Vercida are brilliant to go with. If you're looking at organizational diversity and inclusion and how you best go about that, there's some great consultants. I'm thinking of the Clear Company. They're based not far away from us over in Warrington. They are brilliant. They will actually come in and look at and advise and provide real consultancy on it and give you a degree of confidence and stuff moving forward. Practical tools, things like Recite Accessibility Toolbar to make sure that if you started to attract or reach a diverse group of applicants, and when actually arrive to apply for roles on your site, that you are providing tools that help them in some way.
Yeah.
And it's really just having those simple checks and measures implemented right the way through the process as far as possible. But we will send out, as much advice and different pointers and things as we possibly can, won't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you mentioned the consultancy, of course. I've mentioned Dan. That's what our team does, and then we have the other side of it. That it's like if you're doing the job ads, we can help. We also have a company, Get Optimal, that we work with that actually look at your job ads, so you can pay for that to make sure that they are not unconsciously biased and that they are actually more open and everything. And I do think I've been working in the recruitment industry now, coming up to 30 years, I think, 20 years. And basically, job ads haven't changed. They have not changed one bit. They're still awful in general. And they're still it needs to be redressed, because that's why you don't get that range of people applying because the job ads are written in such a way that they totally do not connect with the diverse people that you generally are looking for, I think. And possibly others as well. I just think and the other side of it, the coin, which is, again, I'm slightly digressing, but I think the way job ads are written, women look at a job ad and they go, oh, I can't do that bit, so I won't apply for it. Sometimes they use the word man. So, you know, I don't know, warehouse man or guys and language like that. And women look at it and go, well, I'm not a man. And I can't do bullet point 4, but I can do everything else, so I won't apply.
Yeah.
Whereas men go,
we'll apply for anything.
Yeah. And that sort of thing, you need to think about that checklist, because that's what we look at when we're looking at a job. We go, can I do it?
Yeah. And if you have, you know, if you're trying to appeal to a certain group and you have somebody in your organization that is already doing that job, then don't be afraid to actually speak to them. Perhaps even better, harness their experience using video and use that as part of the job advert.
Yeah.
You've got your people actually talking about their real experience of working with their organization, what it feels like, what the benefits they've derived from it, what influence they have. Then you use those workplace stories to attract and really, you know, deliver on the promise that, yes, we're an inclusive company. And look, here are people within our organization talking about the experience of what it's like to work with us. And
that's one of the things we provide on Job Train. As I said, you know, it's very hard sometimes to change your website when you suddenly got a job and you're wanting to look for a certain diverse part of the world, that we will do that, create these pages. And to your point, we get people we say, can you find somebody in your company that's in a position or is a person of color or neurodiverse, and explain what the company has done for you, why it's good to work there as a Black individual, a person with neurodiversity, disability, and how inclusive the company is, and give that. Of course, you know, you can argue, of course, you're going to only show us the people that do it. But however, if you haven't got that to set as an example, then you've already negated those other people that might want to come along and work in that same environment. So, yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Good place to finish. Everybody, thank you for joining us. We hope that this conversation, we've rambled a little bit, but hopefully we've touched on some really interesting salient points. There's been a few challenges in there. Hopefully there's been some really useful nuggets of information that you'll be able to take away. If you have any questions coming away from the session, feel free to get in touch with us directly, or Michelle, you can find her on LinkedIn, connect with her as well. We will have, as I said before, a write that we'll send out, and we'll include some practical tips and things. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We hope you have a really good week. I'll be back with another Job Train How Talent session very soon, but have a super week and take care. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.